So, hello there, and welcome back to another Night of the Movies podcast. I'm Spy Knight, and in this podcast, I love talking all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm reviewing The Simpsons Movie. In case you can't see it on the camera too well, I'm holding up the DVD of The Simpsons Movie as I say that. Yes, in today's podcast, I am reviewing The Simpsons Movie. So, let's get into it, shall we? The Simpsons Movie was released all the way back in 2007, which doesn't sound like it was that long ago, but actually was. Now it's almost 20 years ago. It was 18 years ago, if I think a bit more there. I don't know why, but I just couldn't get to the number 18. But anyway, this film was released 18 years ago, which is kind of crazy to say. And this, of course, was the transition from TV to film with The Simpsons. The Simpsons, one of the most groundbreaking and popular shows of all time. It's still insanely popular now. You know, on Disney Plus, The Simpsons has just been renewed for season 38, 39, and 40. That's right, in a couple of years' time, we're going to get season 40 of The Simpsons, which is also insane to say, because The Simpsons is still going strong, regardless of what some people may say online, regardless of my thoughts on Simpsons, you know, on The Simpsons around like season 20 and season 30, when I thought the show took a bit of a dip in quality. Regardless of some of my thoughts on some of the seasons of The Simpsons, the thing is, people still watch the show. People still clearly watch on Disney Plus, otherwise they wouldn't renew the show. You know, just look at some other shows on Disney Plus that have not been renewed. It's kind of difficult for Disney to renew something if it's not popular. So clearly The Simpsons is still getting a big audience. And you know what? I am part of the audience. Recently on Disney Plus, I've been watching the latest season of The Simpsons. There's a brilliant episode, and I want to say it's season 36, which I think is the latest season of The Simpsons on Disney Plus right now. There's this brilliant episode all about Ozempic. If you don't know what Ozempic is, it's basically this drug which is making everybody thin. You know, all these people on TV, all these people in Hollywood nowadays who are really thin, they're all supposedly on this drug. I don't think any of them really admit it, but they're all supposedly on this drug, and this is brilliant, which makes them thin. And there's a brilliant episode of the latest season of The Simpsons where they make fun of that drug that everybody's supposedly on, and it's called like Ozempic, which is such a genius name for the drug. And I loved that episode. I thought it was absolutely hilarious. And I'm not sure if it was in the newest season, which has come out on Disney Plus, but it's in one of the latest seasons that have just come out on Disney Plus, because the season before was released on Disney Plus not too long ago as well. This is another brilliant episode all about Marge getting to grips with the fact that Bart is growing up and that he will eventually become his own person, and that episode is quite emotional and it reminds you of some of those classic Simpsons episodes. I mean, I don't think it's as good as some of those classic Simpsons episodes. I have watched some of those classic Simpsons episodes on Disney Plus, and you know, it's genius. Like the Frank Grimes episode is absolutely fantastic, and you don't get the same quality of Simpsons nowadays as you did back then, but it's getting better. I think it's really good TV at the moment. I think better than a lot of these other comedies that have been running for a long time. You know, sometimes you can tell that a comedy has jumped the shark, and people say The Simpsons jumped the shark with season 9, but I personally don't think it did. But the point I'm making there, the reason I went on a bit of a tangent about The Simpsons and my thoughts on it recently, it's because I'm a big Simpsons fan. I mean, you can even see I have a poster of the Simpsons movie back there. I have Simpsons Funko Pops in my room. You can see some of them there. I've actually got one behind me right now, Mr. Sparkle, if people know what that is a reference to. I've got some Lego Simpsons downstairs. I've got some Lego Simpsons in this room. You can't see me, but behind me on that wardrobe, not that wardrobe, sorry, don't know why I said the wardrobe, on that shelf behind, I have the Lego Quickie Mart and the Lego Simpsons house, which released over 10 years ago now. And just the other day I bought the new Lego Krusty Burger, and I was building that as I was watching this film. To review for today, as I was watching The Simpsons Movie for the upteenth time. I am a huge Simpsons fan, and I continue to be a huge Simpsons fan. And I think the reason I became a huge Simpsons fan is because of this film. I remember when it came out on DVD, because I didn't watch this film in the cinema, because I didn't really go to the cinema back when this film came out. My brother was still boasting out that he got to see this at the cinema, and I'm like, oh, I wish I did. I wish I got to watch it in the cinema, because that would have been an amazing experience for me. It probably would have got me into film earlier than I ended up getting into film, because I think it was like a year later with Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull that I really started to think, oh god, going to the cinema is amazing. But I didn't get that until a year later after this film came out with the fourth Indiana Jones film, which I know is kind of crazy to say, but that's another topic for another day. But yeah, going back on what I was saying, it was with this film that got me into The Simpsons. The Simpsons movie got me into The Simpsons as a whole, because when this film came out on DVD, this is the DVD I've had for all these years. Didn't show up so well when I put it there because of the sunlight, but put it there, you can see it a bit better. This is the Simpsons movie. This is the DVD of The Simpsons movie that I've watched for all the years that I've watched this film and for all the times that I rewatched this movie. I'll tell you now, I have rewatched this film probably more times than I care to admit. When I was a kid, this was the film which I rewatched the most, with close follow-ups of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which is still my favourite movie of all time, Empire Strikes Back, which is my second favourite movie of all time, Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, which is my favourite animated movie of all time, and Shrek the Third, which I don't think is nearly as bad as some people make it out to be. Those movies were the films that I really rewatched the most. But this was number one on that list. This was the film that I rewatched continuously, time and time again. It got to the point where even I thought, wow, I rewatched this so much now that I can remember, I know the lines of dialogue that are coming up in a second in this film. I know these scenes inside out. And the reason I rewatched this film so much when I was at a much younger age is because this was my kind of only exposure to The Simpsons for a long while. Sure, I was one of those kids who watched The Simpsons growing up when it was on like Channel 4, like 6:30 in the evening, but that was only like a half an hour episode. I didn't really feel like I got a lot of time with those characters, and you know, in that half an hour episode, we had these terrible ad breaks as well. And yeah, I had, I think, one of the seasons or two of the seasons of The Simpsons on VHS. Or, well, my family had one of the seasons or two of the seasons of The Simpsons on VHS. But because of the quality of those VHS tapes, I found it as a kid, quite unengaging to watch just because of the quality of the VHS. You know, it's constantly moving about, and it felt old to me. And back then I used to struggle with, you know, stuff that looked and felt old. I just found it unengaging to watch. I don't feel that way now, but I did back then. Whilst with the Simpsons movie, it felt like the most updated thing I could get it felt like the most modern Simpsons thing I could get my hands on, and I would just watch this film time and 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 time, and I could go on and on and on again. I would watch this film non-stop. Every single time I was in the car, my dad used to set up these DVD players in the back of the car that used to go on like the back of the driver's seat and the back of the passenger and the front seat, you know, if you follow me. My dad used to set them up, and whenever we were on like long car journeys, I used to stick on the Simpsons movie. Whenever I was on holiday, I used to stick it on. Whenever I was bored, I used to stick this movie on. I would watch this film non-stop, to the point that it got to, I think I was like the age of, whatever age you are when you're going into secondary school. I can't remember off the top of my head what age that is, but whatever age you are when you go into secondary school, I remember thinking to myself, you have to stop watching this film because it's going to drive you insane if you keep watching it non-stop. So I had a break from watching this film for quite a bit of time, and it wasn't until, I think, last year, actually, now that more I think about it, that I was away on holiday, and I thought, oh, you know what, we got Disney Plus on the Now TV stick, why don't we watch the Simpsons movie again? It's only about 90 minutes long, and hopefully it's going to be something which will pass the time and give us some of those nostalgic feels. And that's exactly what it did. I rewatched the Simpsons movie for the first time in a long time, about a year ago now, and I was reminded of how much I loved it. And watching it again the other day for this review today, I was reminded of how much I fell in love with it in the first place, why I fell in love with it in the first place all over again. I'm not going to say it's without its problems. I don't think it is. It does have its problems, is the better way of saying that. There were plenty of issues with this film, like those classic side characters in The Simpsons, those classic supporting characters like Mr. Burns, Mr. Smithers, Krusty, Lenny and Carl, Moe, Barney, Principal Skinner, Apu, or various other characters like Martin, the kids, Nelson, Milhouse. All these classic supporting characters in The Simpsons don't necessarily get their time to shine in this movie, and you can argue they should have been given more to do, and I would agree with that argument. And I do think Lisa's storyline could have been better. It could have been tied into Homer's redemption arc a bit more. But I can get past all those problems, because to me, whenever I rewatch this film, it feels like the definition of a comfort movie. I rewatch it, I am reminded of, I'm given those feels again like I did all the way back years ago when I watched this film constantly, when I rewatch this film constantly, I am brought back those memories, and it still gives me those summer feels. There's something about this movie which feels like a classic summer blockbuster to me. The sort of film you'd watch in the summer, and it makes you feel like summer. I don't know if anyone has a film like that you watch at a certain time of the year and it makes you feel like it's that certain time of the year. I know a lot of people might say a Christmas film is that for them, but I also have certain films which I associate with the summer. I don't know if anyone else has that, but I do, and this is one of those films that I associate with the summer. Whenever I rewatch it, it gives me those summer feels, and whenever we watched it the other day, it made me feel like it was the summer, and in all the right ways, because I'm not usually a fan of the summer. It's when I get hay fever, as I have a bit in this podcast today, with my bummed up nose, and it's also, I'm not a big fan of the heat. I don't like the warm temperature, but but there were parts of the summer, like just having this time off, just relaxing, just, watching comfort movies that I really do enjoy. And this is one of those films which gives me those feels, which feels like a true comfort movie to me. Plus, I do think the transition from TV to film is done well. I have heard some people online say that the Simpsons movie just feels like a long episode of an episode of The Simpsons, but I disagree. In my opinion, you couldn't have done this in an episode of The Simpsons, because this film has an epic scale to it. You do get a lot of time with the characters, more time than you usually get in a Simpsons episode. And as much as I enjoy watching a Simpsons episode on Disney Plus or on broadcast television, which I still occasionally do, they always move so quickly. You don't really get to spend a lot of time with these characters. And whilst with the Simpsons movie, it feels like it earns its spot as a film. Sometimes you watch these transitions from a TV show to a film, and it doesn't really work. You can tell that it feels like an extended episode of a TV show, and they just were trying to make it into a film for the sake of it, for fans of the TV show. And I'm not going to say that they do it perfectly. I'm not going to say that they transition the TV show to the film perfectly. I don't think they do, but I think they do a damn good job at that. The whole thing with the dome, the whole thing with stakes, there are stakes in this movie which you wouldn't really get in a Simpsons episode. And I think the transition from TV show to film is done very well. I think everybody who was behind this film understood that they had to make this on a more epic scale, with a lot more stake and everything like that. Plus, a lot of people involved in this film were people who were involved in classic Simpsons, and I think you can tell. The likes of James L. Brooks, David Silverman, Matt Selman. These people were involved in classic Simpsons all the way back in the day when it first began in 1989. That's right, The Simpsons have been running since 1989, which is insane to say, but it has been nonetheless. And a lot of the people who were involved in classic Simpsons, not everybody, but a lot of the people who were also involved in the writing and in the making of this film. And I think you can tell that. I think this film has some of the best of classic Simpsons and the best of middle Simpsons. I know a lot of people criticise middle Simpsons, which is like seasons 11 to seasons, 25 to season, around that period, season 11 to season 20-ish. A lot of people criticise Middle Simpsons, but I think there were some gems in Middle Simpsons. I think there's some really great episodes that people don't give enough time to, particularly the Sideshow Bob episodes. There's an episode in Middle Simpsons where you meet Sideshow Bob's family, which is one of my favourite episodes, which I've watched at least 20 times, because I love the character of Sideshow Bob anyway. But that's beside the point. The point I'm making is that there are great episodes in Middle Simpsons, and this film came out around the time of Middle Simpsons, if I'm correct there. And I think you get the best of Middle Simpsons and the best of classic Simpsons with this film. Yeah, there are a few jokes that don't land. Maybe they don't land because I've seen this film an upteenth amount of times, but also, you know, there were so many great moments in this film, and so many moments that just can't help but make you smile and make you laugh out loud. And this is a insanely quotable film, in my opinion. You know, my favourite quotes in this film is from President Schwarzenegger, who isn't voiced by Arnold Schwarzenegger. I wonder if he refused to be in the film, which is kind of crazy because Tom Hanks has a voice cameo in this film, and there's someone else. Yeah, the Green Day has a voice cameo in this film, and I got a feeling there's somebody else. So yeah, it's kind of crazy that Schwarzenegger didn't say yes. I don't know if he was asked, maybe he wasn't, maybe he was. But anyway, President Schwarzenegger, one of my favourite quotes from this film is from that character where he says, "I was elected to lead, not to read." I just love that line of dialogue. And there's all the great lines of dialogue in the film, like when Homer says, "Why does everything I whip leave me?" And then "Clap for Alaska." For some reason I'm forgetting them, so luckily I've written them down, so I don't have to remember them. Rats can't be trapped this easily is something that Russ Cargill, head of the APA, which is genius by the way, is something that Russ Cargill says, the main villain in the film. Rats can't be trapped this easily, you're trapped more like carrots. And then when Marge sees Spider Pig for the first time, she sees Homer singing Spider Pig, you know, Spider Pig does whatever a Spider Pig can, and then Marge goes, "How do the pig traps get on the seat? How do the pig tracks get on the ceiling?" And that just always makes me laugh. And the one piece of dialogue that I say on a day-to-day basis from this film is, "You smiled, I'm off the hook." That's it. "You smiled, I'm off the hook," which is what Homer says to Marge when he's trying to get her to like Spider-Pig, when he's trying to get her to allow Spider-Pig to be in the house. And the whole thing with Spider-Pig, by the way, I love Spider-Pig. He comes back in a Simpsons episode a bit later on, if I'm not mistaken. He comes back a bit later on in The Simpsons in an episode. I wish he became, you know, one of the members of The Simpsons after this film. Because one thing I will say, and it's not necessarily a criticism of this film, it's more of a criticism of The Simpsons in general, but The Simpsons does this all the time, is it doesn't really follow on from the film. You know, there are a few Simpsons storylines which really follow on from each other. I mean, there are a few here and there. They're quite... Actually, now that I've said it, there's quite a lot of storylines in The Simpsons that follow on from one another. You know, big one being Sideshow Bob. Then there's Artie Ziff, the person who's always in love with Marge but never gets her. There's the stuff with Milhouse's parents. There is storylines which do count throughout The Simpsons. You know, stuff with Rainier Wolfcastle. I think that's what the character's called. Yeah, there are storylines which count on The Simpsons, but there's a lot of times when The Simpsons kind of forgets what happened, you know, in the last episode. And it felt like after this movie, The Simpsons kind of forgot what happened in the movie, when you'd think that'd be a big thing going forward in Springfield, in the world of The Simpsons. But apparently it isn't. However, there was a couple of times, I have seen this in some episodes, where they do refer to the event of The Simpsons movie. There's one time where Lenny and Carl are talking to somebody who's new working at the nuclear plant, and they say, you know, there's that time that Homer put the dome over the town. So that was a reference to this movie. And then Spider-Pig does make another appearance. And I think one of the episodes is one of the 20th seasons of The Simpsons. I'm not saying it is the 20th season, but it's one of the seasons in the 20th period, you know, in one of the seasons from like season 20 to season 30. It might even be in season 30, I can't remember. But Spider-Pig comes back, is the point I'm making. And I wish he came back more. I love Spider-Pig, and I think the whole Spider-Pig does whatever a Spider-Pig can is great. I love how I get this like operatic version of that in the musical score later on in the film. And on the topic of the musical score, I love the musical score for this film. I love Hans Zimmer's musical score. It is is vastly underrated in my opinion. You know, so many people when they talk about Hans Zimmer's best musical scores, they say so like Pirates of the Caribbean, which is a very good score, Gladiator, again, another very good score, or Inception, very good score. You get the point I'm making. A lot of people don't really talk about other Hans Zimmer scores other than the ones that he did with Nolan or Pirates of the Caribbean, which is arguably his most famous. Or, you know, people talk about certain Hans Zimmer scores a lot more than others. One of my favourites is personally the score to True Romance, because it doesn't sound like a Hans Zimmer score. And that's one of the reasons, that is actually the reason, that's one of the reasons, should I say, that I love this score so much, because it doesn't sound like your typical Hans Zimmer score, to the point that when I rewatched this film, the themes from the film got stuck in my head, and it wasn't for a while until I bought the score on CD. You know, CDs, if people still remember what they are. I bought the score on CD, and I was like, oh, the score's by Hans Zimmer. And you wouldn't think it was from the way the score sounds. It's a lot more orchestral. There's themes throughout it. And one of my criticisms with Hans Zimmer's music, as good as it is and as atmospheric and as, you know, as effective as Hans Zimmer scores can be, they don't always have a main theme in there. Like, you can't sing the theme to Inception. You can't really sing the theme to like Interstellar, or you can't really sing the theme to Dunkirk. Again, very good scores, but you can't sing the main themes to those films. Whilst, you know, you do have some exceptions. You can sing the scores to Pirates of the Caribbean, or you can sing the score to True Romance, or you could try to, you know, dun 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 dun. We have the same effect. But yeah, one of my criticisms with Hans Zimmer is I don't think he really has a main theme for a lot of his films that really, you know, stand out, in my opinion, in my personal opinion. But I think the score to this film has plenty of themes in there which do stand out and which do sound unlike so much of his work. And he did this score in the same year he did the score to the third Pirates of the Caribbean film, Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. And I like the score to that film. I actually think the score to that film is better than that film in itself. But it's very different at the same time. It's very different than the score to the Simpsons movie. And I love when a composer really shows how much range they have, particularly in one year. You know, John Williams did it in 1977 with the scores to Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Although you can tell both of those scores are John Williams scores, they're still very different, you know. And the same with the scores to Catch Me If You Can and Minority Report in 2002. Two great scores which, well, yeah, you can arguably tell they're both John Williams scores. You might be able to tell that Catch Me If You Can is a John Williams score, but the point I'm making is they're both John Williams scores, and yet they sound different. And that's one of the reasons I love John Williams so much. You know, the scores to Jurassic Park and Schindler's List, which he did in the same year. I could go on and on with John Williams. And I can't go on and on with Hans Zimmer, but one of my favourite examples of that with Hans Zimmer is in 2007 when he did the score to Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End and the score to this movie, the Simpsons Movie, which are two vastly different scores. And I love that, because it really shows his range. And I think the score to this film is some of Hans Zimmer's best work. I don't care what anybody says. I think he did a wonderful job scoring this film, really capturing the heart and the energy and the sense that this is the Simpsons movie, and doing so in a way which makes the film feel more cinematic. And I love that about this film. Furthermore, I love the opening to this film where you get Itchy and Scratchy the movie and the Simpsons are watching Itchy and Scratchy the movie in the cinema. Then Homer quite literally breaks the fourth wall and says, why are we watching something, I'm not going to quote it verbatim, but why are we watching something that we could just watch from home on our TV screens for free? I say everybody in the cinema is stupid, especially you. And then he points at the camera, and I'm like, well, yeah, he points at us, at the audience, and he's breaking the fourth wall in a genius way, because it's like, it's literally making fun of us. Why are we here watching the Simpsons movie? Why have we paid to watch the Simpsons movie when we can just watch it from when we could just watch Simpsons from the comfort of your own home? And not, you know, other films which have transitioned from a TV show wouldn't do something like that. And it's one of the reasons I love The Simpsons so much, is he's breaking the fourth wall jokes which work perfectly. And I love the heart of the film. I love how this film, you know, really focuses on the relationships that matter, that are the big relationships in The Simpsons, that The Simpsons always goes back to, and those are the relationships between Homer and Bart and Homer and Marge. You know, The Simpsons also goes a lot. The Simpsons also focuses a lot on the relationship between Homer and Lisa, which isn't focused on enough in this film, in my opinion. But the relationship between Homer and Marge is, it's heartbreaking and it's both heartbreaking and heartwarming to watch in this film. When you see their wedding video, which doesn't canonically make sense for the rest of the Simpsons, because in earlier Simpsons, you see that Homer and Marge get married in Vegas, if I remember correctly. They have a crummy little wedding which no one attends, but in this movie they have their own wedding video which you see other Simpsons characters did attend, so that doesn't quite canonically work. But the thing is, it's effective, and it's effective emotionally, so when you get that scene in the film, it really works. And I think that also makes the relationship between Homer and Marge work in the film as well. And so you can hear some sound interference, by the way. There's some work being done outside my house. But the point I'm making is, I love the relationship between Homer and Marge in this film, and I love the relationship between Homer and Bart in this film. How Bart starts to find a father in Ned Flanders. And then by the end of this film, you have these heart-to-heart moments between Homer and Bart, which really start to mend their relationship. And then the TV series goes back on that, which is kind of expected. The episodes after this film came out the episodes of The Simpsons after this film came out still portray Homer and Bart's relationship as quite a, not a great one, as quite a strained one, but the way this film portrays the relationship is effective, and it makes for a great character arc with Homer. Homer goes through the motions of the film, he has his redemption, and you end up rooting for him. Even though Homer is a very problematic character, there's a lot of things wrong, gets everybody into a near-death situation in Springfield, you still end up rooting for him by the end of this film. And I think that's the power of great writing in The Simpsons, and great writing with this film. There's just so much about it which I absolutely love. The animation still holds up. This film came out 18 years ago now. 18 years ago, and yet the animation still looks amazing. It still looks, better than the animation Simpsons episodes did around the time that this came out. The animation has held up so well to the point that you can actually imagine this film came out yesterday, because of how well the animation looks. And I love all the little pieces of trivia, all the little fun facts regarding this film, that apparently it was an absolute nightmare to make. I love films which were a nightmare to make and end up doing so well, end up becoming these great movies. Back to the Future was famously a nightmare to make. The Godfather was famously a nightmare to make. The original Star Wars movie was famously a nightmare to make. And yet, look how well those films turned out. Jaws, which has just turned 50. Look how that film famously had a terrible production, and yet look how amazing that's turned out. People regard Jaws as one of the best films of all time. And I'm not saying The Simpsons Movie is one of the best films of all time, but when you actually read up about how much hell the production of this film went through, how the actors were re-recording their lines again and again and again and again and again, it's amazing how this film didn't turn out like a sort of Frankenstein movie. Like it was all just stitched together. There's a plot, there's a narrative that threads through, there's character arcs, and it's amazing that the film did turn out as well as it did, in my opinion. And I also love the little piece of trivia that if you watch the film on DVD, as I have done about 1 billion times, at the start of the film where Professor Frink says movie on the big screen, if you watch it on the DVD, it says movie on the small screen in the opening. And if you watch it on Disney Plus now, which is the version of the film that was shown in cinemas, it says movie on the big screen. So if you watched the film in the cinema, you got a slightly different opening than they did on DVD. Just little pieces of trivia like that regarding this film just make me love it all the more. Another thing I love about this film is its main theme, at least the main theme to me of the movie, and not musically, but the main theme narratively, in that Homer is his own worst enemy, and yet he overcomes that. And you being your own worst enemy is one of those things that has always been there for me. A lot of the times, not to get too personal here, but a lot of the times, because people don't care too much, but a lot of the time I have felt I'm my own worst enemy, and I kind of relate to Homer when it comes to this film. It's one of the reasons I love Curse of the Were-Rabbit and Shrek the Third. You know, it's one of the reasons when I was growing up, I would watch those films again and again and again because they had those themes. You are your own worst enemy. In Curse of the Were-Rabbit, Wallace is quite literally the main enemy of the film as well as the hero. So, you know, I like how this song with Homer, the main theme there for me with it, is that Homer is his own worst enemy, and I think that's the one, and I think it makes Homer a relatable character to me, and that's one of the reasons I think the film spoke to me at a younger age and still speaks to me now. Yeah. I understand the Simpsons movie has problems. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying it's one of my favourite animated movies. Not at all. But it's a film that I return to time and time again because to me it feels like the best of the Simpsons. And it feels like a true comfort movie with laugh out loud jokes which still work for me, even though I've seen this film about 1 billion times, and that's no exaggeration. I have seen this film about 1 billion times. The jokes still work for me. The characters are all just great to watch. Sure, would have liked more focus on the famous supporting characters, but I feel like the film is at the right length. It flies by still, and I can't help but love this film. It feels like a proper summer movie to me, a proper summer blockbuster, and not many films feel like that to me. There are very few films where I can watch and they give off those summer feels, and I think when a film manages to do that, it is working very well because it kind of makes you want to return to it every summer. You know, I don't know if anyone else has those feels, but whenever I rewatch the first 3 Indiana Jones films, they feel like summer films to me. And the Simpsons movie I would put in that list as well. And I like when a movie gives you those summer feels, and that's exactly what this film does. And it does that because of the writing, the characters, the world, the animation, the musical score, and everything that I've talked about in this review today. Yes, I love the Simpsons movie. Absolutely love it, and that is why I'm going to say that the Simpsons movie is an 8.5 out of 10. I'm giving it that rating more from a personal standpoint. If I were to put my film critic or my film reviewing hat on, should I say? I'm not a film critic, but if I was to put my film reviewing hat on, I'd be like, you know, this doesn't work, a bit baggy, you know, I could probably pick apart loads of problems with this film. And if this film was to come out now, my expectations would be a lot different, and I probably wouldn't love it the same way I do. But this is one of those films which, to me, is a product of its time. It's a product of when I watched it. If I didn't watch it at the young age that I did watch it, then I probably wouldn't feel the same affection to it. But because I watched it at a young age, and because it was my first exposure to The Simpsons, it was a reason I fell in love with The Simpsons, then if I didn't feel that way, I wouldn't feel that strongly about this movie. But because of all those reasons I've just said, because it was my first exposure to The Simpsons, this was a reason that I fell in love with The Simpsons, I can't help but love this film. And I am more of a Simpsons guy than any other, you know, animated adult sitcom. I'm not really a Family guy. I'm not really an American Dad guy. I've seen some other bits and pieces. I'm not really a Futurama person either. Maybe I need to give Futurama more of a go, because I know it's made by the same people who do The Simpsons. But the point I'm making is, I'm more of a Simpsons guy, and I think that's the case because of this film. One last thing I'm going to say as I finish off this rambling review, or my views of rambling, this is no different, is I really wish one day we get to see the sequel to this film. They tease it during the credits where Maggie says her first word, sequel, and they tease it, and apparently there's been talks of doing a sequel for the longest time. The filmmakers who are behind The Simpsons, which is still going now, they still talk about it today, but there's been no official confirmation or no rumours regarding report of a Simpsons movie anytime soon. I personally think they should end The Simpsons as a whole with a Simpsons movie. End it with a bang. Maybe like Sideshow Bob comes back for good and he finally gets defeated for good. I don't know. That just spitballing there. Maybe all the villains that we see in The Simpsons, my computer's trying to talk to me there. Maybe all the villains that we see in The Simpsons come back in one big thing, and it's like making fun of, I don't know, the Avengers movies. I'm just coming up with random ideas here at the top of my head, but the point I'm making is I would love to see The Simpsons movie 2. Don't call it that, call it something else, because Simpsons Movie 2 doesn't sound as good as like the Simpsons Movie with the subtitle, but I'd love to see a sequel to the Simpsons Movie as a conclusion to the Simpsons overall. And I love the Simpsons. I love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. And I love it because of this movie. To me, this is a true comfort film that gives me those summer feels, which you always want from this time of the year, and has this thing about which always draws me back to it. I think, I'm not saying every year, but I think from now onwards, I will probably go back to rewatch the Simpsons Movie. Yeah, maybe at least once a year, or maybe once every other year. I don't know. Just the point I am making is, going forward, and I said the point I'm making quite a few times in this review today, but I'm going to repeat it again here. The point I am making is, going forward, I'm going to rewatch the Simpsons Movie a lot more. Probably around this summer period as well, because of the feelings it gives me. To me, this film never gets old. Even so, I've seen it a billion times. It made me fall in love with The Simpsons, and that's something I do not take for granted, as I am a big, big Simpsons fan to this day, and I'm still a big fan of The Simpsons Movie. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that The Simpsons Movie is an 8.5 out of 10 from me. Anyway guys, that's it for today's podcast. If you have seen The Simpsons Movie, please let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching or listening to this podcast. And if you haven't yet, please click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast. I look forward to many more podcasts and many more reviews, many more videos coming very, very soon on this channel. As I've already said, thank you so much for watching or listening to this podcast. And I will see you guys again soon. But bye for now. Bye.